Let's talk about it. Some people keep talking about big name players and splash moves. But let me ask you this. Are the Minnesota Vikings actually building something? Or are we just chasing big names during this current offseason? Because I'm going to say this right now, and some of you might not agree, and part of you might be a little agitated. But the Minnesota Vikings are not in the win now situation. So why are we trying to move like it? Now, I see people talking about Dexter Lawrence, and don't get me wrong, he's elite. But is that the right move right now, especially with the current state of this roster? Or are we ignoring much bigger problems on this roster because it has holes all over it that needs to get filled? So today, I'm breaking down the philosophy, the roster, draft strategy, and the quarterback situation, of course. So let's get into it. Now, I got to say something. Why is it that every time there's a big name player that has the potential to become available, Viking fans start salivating and talking about that person is a missing piece? Like I said before, I get it. Dexter Lawrence is elite, but I'm not sure that's the right move we should be talking about or hoping that that happens in the near future. Now, I'm going to break down why I feel this way so you can get a better understanding on my stance with the situation. Now, Dexter Lawrence is elite. Let's just get that out the way. Even though the last two seasons might have been down years, but he still is that big dog in the building. Let's just get that out there. And this whole thing is not about Dexter Lawrence, the player. This is about the Vikings philosophy going forward and how we can build a better roster, that can contend in the playoffs and maybe be a Super Bowl contender, in years to come. So look, acquiring Dexter Lawrence right now, you would have to trade multiple draft picks, right? And that will potentially take away the young development on this roster. And just like I said earlier, this roster has a lot of holes, and this draft right now is extremely important. And they need to get some young players in certain positions so they can come out there and succeed, and this roster can go forward. But if you have to use some of those draft picks to trade for Dexter Lawrence, that kind of like makes that whole thing not even possible. Now, I do get the situation of, hey, you can pair him with Jalen Redmond and put Dexter Lawrence in the middle, as a nose tackle, and he can eat up, offensive linemen, and everybody can get free. I get that. But this is a deep draft. I said it before on my last stream that this probably may not be the draft that you can look forward to getting a lot of superstar players, but you can get depth. And I think the last mock draft that we did over the weekend, we end up getting two interior defensive linemen. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen for the Minnesota Vikings, but that's the game plan that the Minnesota Vikings should be going forward within this draft. Now, with bringing in Dexter Lawrence, man, it hurts the long-term growth for the interior defensive line position. You got guys like Tariq Ingram Dawkins, Jalen Redmond, Elijah Williams, Levi Drake Rodriguez. And I understand some people out there be like, well, these ain't household names yet. Well, they'll never be household names if you slide somebody like Dexter Lawrence in there. And like, you won't even be drafting interior defensive lineman in this draft either, just like I stated before. Now, that's something that we got to think about with just the development on this roster. But the one thing, that's surrounding this whole situation that makes it messy is Dexter Lawrence wants a new contract, right? He wants a new contract, something upwards to 25, 28 million a season. The Vikings don't really have money like that, to spend on this roster. They are already, going through negotiations of, what they're going to do with Jonathan Gennard going forward because he wants a pay raise. So you're telling me you want to bring in a player like Dexter Lawrence, who's 28 right now. He's not that old. He still has some great years ahead. But when you trade for him, you're going to trade draft picks away, and then you're going to have to pay him. So that's taking away two different types of assets. They're taking away the assets of basically like cash over cap, the money you have to pay him, and then the other assets will be the potential draft pick that you would have to give the New York Giants to actually acquire him. So I want people out there to actually really think about the situation with Dexter Lawrence going forward. Because just like I said before, I keep going back to it. I know I'm sounding like a broken record. This may not be the move that the Vikings should do right now. I don't think the Vikings are a Dexter Lawrence away to becoming a Super Bowl contender. It's too many holes on his roster. It's too many players on this team that needs to be developed. This is probably one of the most important drafts for the Vikings in the past couple of seasons because the last four drafts have not been great. And this is the first time where the Vikings are going to a draft where they potentially have all their picks outside of, the fourth round pick that was lost. So we just gotta, put that into consideration. So as far as me not being, you know, up to the Dexter Lawrence situation, so I think we should move it on and talk about the roster needs and the concerns that I have for this roster going forward. Now, let's be real. This roster is not complete as of right now. The draft is in a couple of weeks. So what you're going to see is the Vikings are going to draft some players. It might be some trades here and there, Jonathan Gennard or moving up and down the draft. That's probably going to happen. And then you're going to see another wave of free agents, after the draft. I was waiting to see if a team goes out and gets a need or fills a hole, whatever, and then now they didn't fill it. So then you're going to get that wave of the free agents after the draft. So let's break down some of the key potential roster spots I think the Vikings should explore during this draft. Now, center is a big topic, cornerback, safety, and interior defensive lineman. I think those four positions are at the top of the list for the Vikings to fill. Now, talking about the center, we've heard that Blake Brandell will be officially going to center this season. I think he's better suited as the sixth offensive lineman. I'm not running the team. That's only my opinion. Cornerback, there's only three playable cornerbacks on this roster right now. You need more youth and depth there. Safety, y'all know how I feel about Josh Metellus, Jay Ward, and all those other guys. I think you need to bring in at least two safeties. One high in the draft and maybe one that you can develop in the background or either bring somebody in, during free agency after draft. And interior D-line, you need that big that big run stopping defensive lineman in the middle to kind of clog things up. Now, the lack of depth areas that I think the Vikings could explore during the draft. Now, this is a scenario to where it's like the Vikings have players at these spots, but I feel that they should go out and get more depth and change, some of the youth with these positions. And that position is running back, wide receiver, and tackle. Now, with running back, I get it. The Vikings figured something out with Aaron Jones, and he took a pay cut, so he's back for another season. They traded for Jordan Mason last year, and they still have Xavier Scott. That's cool with me. I mean, I have no problem with that. I mean, it is what it is, but they still need more pop and more explosion at the running back position. I think they can probably look at a running back and maybe, the second round or third round because Aaron Jones will be gone next year. And we don't know what the Minnesota Vikings are going to do with Jordan Mason after this season. And I feel it is best to get ahead of the curve before something else happens. And we saw last year with Jordan Mason going down and Aaron Jones dealing with his injuries. So if you bring in another young running back, I mean, things can only get better in that room. That could be the running back and me talking, but y'all know how I feel about running backs. Now, wide receivers. All right, this is a tricky one because the Vikings did draft a wide receiver in the third round. It was late in the third round. Let's get it out. It was one of the last picks in the third round, and Ty Felton. Ty Felton really didn't see the field on offense last year. We don't know how he's going to come into training camp. We don't know if he's going to take a step forward with Speedy leaving, with Jalen Naylor leaving. The Minnesota Vikings and going to the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, you got to bring in some more talent at wide receiver because just like I said with running backs, injuries can happen at any time, and you don't want to be down to your fourth running back, your fourth wide receiver, and you didn't get no depth there. I hope that Ty Felton can take the next step. I believe in Keenan McCardell. That's the guy he wanted in the draft. So hopefully that he can come in, make that step forward. But I still think the Vikings should go out there and get another receiver. Even though, the Vikings restructured Justin Jefferson's contract and they picked up Jordan Addison's fifth year, still go out there and get you another receiver, maybe in the fourth round, or maybe if one of these top receivers drop, into the second round or whatever, you got to figure it out. You got to do it. And another position also too, this is something that the Vikings have to explore now and get ahead of what can potentially happen. Tackle. Christian Darrisaw, we don't know how healthy he's going to be starting the season. He's been dealing with injuries basically his whole career. I mean, when he plays, he's elite. He's great. I can't say he's a Pro Bowler because he hasn't made the Pro Bowl as of yet. He hasn't had an all-pro season because he's always dealing with injuries. Now, that's the left tackle. Now, the right tackle and Brian O'Neill, they keep saying they're going to try to get something done and either extending his contract for maybe 1 or 2 seasons, but he's getting up in age. And I'm one of the people out there that wants to keep Brian O'Neill on this team for maybe 2 more seasons because I like his leadership. Like, I understand his play has dipped a little bit, but at the same time, you always want to keep, your leaders in the building because that's the intangibles. But the Vikings should explore drafting a tackle in this draft just in case. And that's the thing, like, you have to always do when you're building your team. You don't necessarily always have to draft for your need right now. You might have to draft for a need maybe next year. Now, we're going to get into this, more in the next topics, but that's how I see it for, the positions on this roster that lack depth in my position and in my opinion. Sorry. Now, we already talked about Brian O'Neill getting up in age, but another player that's getting up in age is Blake Cashman. Blake Cashman, I'm not sure if he hit the 30 clip yet, but he also deals with a lot of injuries. He missed, I think, like 4 games last year. He was on short-term IR, and I know Eric Wilson is back too next year, but he's up in age also. Linebacker might be a position the Vikings might need to get some depth there too. Just like I said before, they can do this in the draft, or they can do this after the draft with players that, we're waiting for teams in that, retrospect. Now, with the safeties, we kind of already talked about the safeties. It's kind of the same thing. I don't think some of these safeties are playable. I think you have to get real safeties on the roster that can actually cover, so you can kind of put Josh Metellus back in that rover star role. That's where he plays the best. But I'm not even sure Josh Metellus can actually do that again this year. I'm not big on Josh Metellus. I'm really not. But hey, and that's just what I'm saying. Like the Vikings have too many holes on this roster on both sides of the ball, and trading for a player like Dexter Lawrence is just a luxury move, in my opinion. I don't think the Vikings should do that. So let's keep it moving. Now, let's talk about the draft strategy. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware, if you saw like some of the little interviews, little tidbits that interim GM Rob Brzezinski talked about. He talked about drafting BPA, which is best player available versus needs. And he basically broke it down, talking about how some teams, and how the Vikings did sometimes, to where they would basically reach in the draft just to draft a need. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But with BPA, you get the best player available, even if that's not a need right now on your team. So I'm all for it. I'm all for BPA. Y'all know how I feel about that. I told you time and time again, the Minnesota Vikings didn't need to draft Adrian Peterson because Chester Taylor, hey, he had a 1,000-yard season prior, and look what happened. They got one of the best running backs in the draft because they did best player available. That's how you need to draft. Now, if you don't really understand it, I'm going to just be real quick and break it down to you, best way I can. Best player available adds elite talent on the roster. but it might not fill the immediate holes, right? So you got to get that. So you got to be prepared when a team goes best player available, like Dallas Turner, right? Dallas Turner, in my opinion, best player available for the Minnesota Vikings when they got him where they got him at. Some people will debate that and be like, oh, no, it was Jared Verse. But Jared Verse is a defensive end that keeps his hand in the dirt. He's more of that Daniil Hunter type role. But Dallas Turner is a guy that can stand up, that can cover, he can do more things. So, best player available during that draft, right? The Vikings already had Jonathan Gennard and Van Ginkel that was signed that offseason. Now, this is before they had their breakout seasons. And during that breakout seasons, Dallas Turner was on the roster. And that's just why I keep saying, like, it's time to let Dallas Turner pop. It's time to let him, take over the reins. But that was best player available. So now you don't have to go into last year's draft or this year's draft and try to get you a pass rusher like Dallas Turner because you drafted him 2 years ago. That's the scenario with best player available. Now, when you reach and you go into the draft with blinders on and you feel like, hey, I gotta draft a center, I gotta draft a wide receiver, whatever. Sometimes it don't work out. We saw it happen with Laquan Treadwell. I mean, Laquan Treadwell was drafted in the first round, and it was just like, okay, what are the Minnesota Vikings doing? But at that time, we didn't see the emergence of Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen. We couldn't foresee that was happening, that a fifth round pick in Diggs and an undrafted free agent was going to basically be the 1-2 punch at receiver for the Vikings. Like, we didn't see that, but that's how the Vikings went to that prospective draft, by drafting for need and not best player available. And we're not gonna get into it and go through it and be like, oh, Quasi was the one that messed this team up and all the drafts were terrible. We get that. That's why he got fired, because he didn't draft good. I mean, there's probably some outside stuff that's, talking about with this team that was going on that didn't really get released to the public. But Quasi's not here anymore. And I'm not going to keep harping on what Quasi did, because now the Vikings have the ability to change the narrative. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so against the whole Dexter Lawrence situation, because you don't want to exploit two different type of assets with the draft and spending the money in free agency just to get him on the book. So that's how I feel like, the draft strategy should be. Even if you have to trade down or trade up just to move around, and that's done. I mean, we Viking fans, we've seen that happen with Rick Spielman a lot of years. Sometimes it got on our nerves, but a lot of the other times, it kind of worked out. He basically felt like, I'm gonna try to get more bites at the apple to kind of figure things out. So I'm not saying they should go in there with that same philosophy, but it got to be a better philosophy than what we've seen the past 4 seasons. Straight up. Now, I'm glad we talked about Rick Spielman and we talked a little bit about Quasi. So let's get into this front office GM situation and let's talk about it. Let's talk about the people up in the office making all the important decisions. We ain't gonna throw no shade on Kevin O'Connell and be like, Kevin O'Connell is the de facto GM. He's the one making all the moves. Nah, I believe Rob really got a lot of say so in the building. He's been with this team for over 28 years. I feel he's been great with the cap situations. He always developed and created contracts to where maybe year one, maybe year two, year three, sorry, to where the Vikings can actually get out and not eat so much dead cap. He's been great in that role. I mean, you kind of don't stay around in the front office for 28 years if you're not doing a good job. But the question isn't about how good Rob is with the cap. The question really is, can Rob actually be the GM of the future? Now, I heard this on Purple Daily, and it kind of changed my perspective on how I looked at the situation with the front office and the GM, right? It was basically, I'm not sure who called in or wrote a message or whatever, but it kind of makes sense. Like when you fire a GM during the offseason, you fire him like in January, right? After the Super Bowl, whatever. So in that time, you're gonna have to take time out a couple of weeks to kind of interview before you find a GM for this team. Then you get a GM, let's say late January, early February. that GM only has a couple of months to kind of put together any kind of game plan for the draft. He's going to have to use the last GM's scouting department and lean on coaches or whatever. It's depending if the coach was, not fired. More cases than none, the coach gets fired too, and they just have a clean state. But the Viking situation is a little unique because the coach starts still intact, but there's no real GM, only an interim one. And it actually does make sense for a GM to come in after the draft, after the whole, debacle and everybody rustling and everything like that. It makes sense because then that GM will basically come in and see the whole season and evaluate everything from there, and then be able to develop his own strategy the next offseason. It's just something that I didn't really actually think about because I never looked at it, during that light. But when we're talking about the GM, I need a GM to come in here to have full authority, and that's going to stabilize this team and have vision going forward because that's what I feel that the Minnesota Vikings need. I I really do feel that way. So that's the GM situation. I'm not sure if Rob wants the job because they said they're going to start the GM search after the draft. I mean, we were all told that, when they fired Quakey. So it's not a surprise to us that are really tapped in with the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, it's expected, but man, it seems like this is going to be one of these off seasons, man, to where it's like we're going to look back and be like, damn, the Vikings was doing all that. Yeah, it's it's going to be it's going to be something. So let's keep it moving. Let's keep it moving. And y'all know, y'all know what's next, man. Y'all know what's next. We got to talk about the quarterback scenario. Like, is it a real competition, or does Kyler Murray already have the job? We heard Kevin O'Connell slip when he was asked the question, and he went on a tangent talking about Kyler Murray being able to run the football, blah blah blah, and he can make all the plays, and yeah, and then he tried to dial it back a little bit. But I really brought this topic up because I actually wanted to be transparent and honest with you guys because sometimes, I can come off like I don't like Kyler Murray. And I'm not saying Kyler Murray sucks. I'm not agitated or upset about Kyler Murray, the person. The thing that bothers me was the philosophy, or is the philosophy, right? Like it's not Kyler. Like I just really want to get that out there for y'all. It's not Kyler. It's the fact that I feel that JJ McCarthy gives the team the best option and the worst option going forward. And I see it like, okay, Kyler Murray, let's say he's great. Let's say he's great and, the Vikings have a great season. Cool, right? We don't know if Kyler Murray going to be here next year, right? Then you got the situation with JJ McCarthy. Now, if he plays and he plays good, then you got something. If he gets hurt, then he can't stay healthy. So that's my thing with it. Like I just really want to keep saying that because I don't want people out there to think like I hate Colin Murray. It's not Colin Murray, the person, man. It's the philosophy. I really think Kevin O'Connell is doing a lot of things to save his job, and he's doing all these PR moves and talking about he's going to change the offense to Kyler's needs, and that kind of pisses me off because like you didn't want to change the offense for nobody else. It was your offense on the highway. But now, considering you coming off of a bad season where you didn't make the playoffs again, and people are basically calling out your offense, now you want to change it. I just don't want this to be like a complete shit show. You know what I'm saying? Like I see that it can be the potential of can be, but as a Viking fan, like part of me does feel like, man, like I don't want this team to look that bad. But that might be the best case for the Vikings if they bottom out and they get a high draft pick. Kevin O'Connell won't be drafting it, but like I really don't know, man, because it's kind of like it's hard. Like it's really hard with this situation surrounding this quarterback scenario because it's like as a big time Viking fan, I root for this team, through hell or high water. Like I'm a Viking fan all day, every day. And I don't want to be on here talking about I want this team to lose. Like when this when this season starts, I'm gonna be dialed in, like, but that's real hard for me because like I really don't support some of the moves the Vikings have made. And this is gonna be one of these seasons that's gonna be me pulling teeth and having to feel a certain type of way because hey, I'm not feeling what the vision is, but maybe, if the Vikings do hire a GM, going forward, that can actually set my mind at ease. I mean, we already kind of dived in, the best case, worst case scenario. We don't really have to like get into that too much. But yeah, man, it's just gonna be tough, man. It's just gonna be tough because I really don't know what this team gonna do, man. Like like I said earlier, man, it's not about Kyler Murray, the person. It's about the whole scenario with these quarterbacks and me being tired of the Minnesota Vikings being, a doormat for, mercenary quarterbacks to come in here, have a one-off season and then go somewhere else and get paid. And I'm not saying that, that Sam did that or Kirk did that or whatever, but as a Viking fan, has been a Viking fan for over 20 years now, I really want to see this team have their own franchise quarterback. I just got to open up myself to be, open to the fact that maybe the Vikings see Kyler as that, and maybe McCarthy is not the one that the Vikings see in the future. But it's it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough, man. And this offseason has been, a whirlwind of a lot of different things happening. The GM getting fired, the Vikings bringing in Kyler Murray, Jonathan Gennard basically saying he wants more money, he wants to get traded. Typical Minnesota Vikings offseason. I should be okay with this because I'm a Laker fan, and Lakers are always in the media for something. So yeah. But let's let's close this out, man. I'm gonna close this out with like my closing statements real quick. Let me just change my scene real quick. All right, look. So I gotta ask y'all this. Are the Vikings doing these things the right way? And should the Vikings be chasing big names like Dexter Lawrence or focusing on building a team during the draft and building for the foreseeable future? And is the draft strategy of BPA, best player available, or should the Vikings just draft needs? I'm asking y'all in the comments. Y'all let me know. Now, I got more shit for y'all, so stay tuned. And I just got to get this video over. So let's go.